The night before the wedding, I casually glanced at Eric's phone. He had posted a video of me with a cane in the group chat. Can someone explain this? Every time I see her limping, I feel like throwing up. I wish I'd been the one to lose a leg back then. I'd rather that than spend my life with someone I don't love. I feel like running away from this wedding so bad. Suddenly, I was back at the car accident moment. This time, as Eric wished, I didn't save him. And now, he was the one who lost a leg and went blind. Eric's phone was vibrating like crazy while he was in the shower. As soon as I picked up the phone, I accidentally saw the messages on the screen. How about we just go out, get drunk, and the wedding won't happen tomorrow? Or just disappear, come back in a month, and your folks won't blame you. You've taken care of Nora for 3 years, you can't waste your whole life on her. Just give her family some money to make up for it. You could even pretend you lost your memory. I stood there, frozen, my hands shaking. I couldn't believe the guy I've liked for 10 years was planning to run from our wedding just when I was nervously excited about it. Every message I scrolled through made my heart sink a little more. Can someone explain this? Every time I see her limping, I feel like throwing up. I wish I'd been the one to lose a leg back then. If it weren't for Nora's company being worth something, I wouldn't have put up with this for so long. Those words were full of disgust for me. He even posted a video of me using a cane in his friend group. In the video, my left leg was missing from the knee down. When the accident happened 3 years ago, I didn't hesitate to shield Eric. I took most of the impact and lost my left leg because of it. I was a dancer, but now I had no leg. I fell apart, hitting rock bottom. But I remember Eric back then, eyes full of sympathy. He gently carried me, patiently helping me practice over and over. He'd promised me softly, Nora, don't give up. I'll be with you forever. If you can never walk, I'll be your legs for life. But the messages were a brutal slap in my face. He took videos meant to encourage me and turned them into a joke with his friends. What I struggled to walk for looked ridiculous to him. As I cried uncontrollably, Eric came in. Nora, what's wrong? Seeing my tear-stained face, Eric's voice went tense. He tenderly kissed my forehead. Is it because of tomorrow's wedding? Are you too nervous? My Nora, do you have cold feet? I turned away in silence, biting my lip hard. Eric tried to hug me, but seeing the phone screen made his face turn ghostly white. He snatched the phone from me, panic all over his eyes. I was shaking all over, even as I tried hard to stay calm. Facing my accusations, Eric couldn't say a word. After a long silence, he dropped the act and showed his true colors. He yelled, stripping away all pretense. What do you understand? Do you know what my life has been like for the past 3 years? Every gathering, all my friends have pretty girlfriends, and there's only me, forever alone. So many people gossip behind my back because you, my girlfriend, are disabled. Eric's words cut deep like knives, slowly shredding my heart, each word hitting where it hurt. The look in his eyes was pity mixed with sarcasm. It felt like all the warmth over these 3 years was just his charity to me. If I could, I wish you never saved me. My nails were digging into my palms by then. In that moment, I couldn't tell where it hurt more, inside or out. A burning, suffocating feeling clouded my mind. Everything around me went silent. The next moment, the scene shifted. No longer the apartment we shared for 3 years, but the back seat of a car. The day Eric and I drove back to college to get our diplomas. A loud bang. A vehicle ahead turning left collided with a speeding tanker. We were rear-ended, and I got hit hard in the back this time. As Eric had wished, I didn't throw myself in front of him. In my last moment of consciousness, I saw Eric trapped in his seat. I dreamed a long dream. In the dream, I wore a prosthetic. I walked slowly in a white wedding dress onto the stage. I was thrilled, waiting for my prince. But the next second, the screen that was supposed to show sweet moments of me and Eric switched to images of me breaking down, crying hysterically. People pointed fingers, and my groom took another girl's hand. He smiled and said, Nora, forgive me. I just can't spend my life with someone I don't love. I can give you plenty of money, but I can't keep taking care of you. I've always loved Rose. I was left at the wedding, with everyone's eyes filled with pity. I felt like a clown rejected by the whole world. I had never hated anyone as much as I did then, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of hatred. I stumbled like a lunatic. The scene changed, and I was on top of a hotel. My white wedding dress danced in the wind. Like a butterfly, I spread my wings. All I could hear was my mom's desperate scream. When I woke up in the hospital, Eric was already in the emergency room. I froze for a moment, hardly believing I was really back. I thought it was just a dream. But when I pinched the flesh on my left leg, it was really there. Ecstatic, tears poured from my eyes instantaneously. My mom held me tight, her warm tears soaking my clothes. "Nora, you almost scared me to death." I could hear the tremble in her voice. She was grateful I'd survived this. "It's just a pity about Eric." I remembered how, in my previous life, Mom held back tears at the sight when I woke, and the chaotic, heart-wrenching cries at the wedding left in ruins. Everything felt like it happened in another lifetime. This is great, I get a second chance. I hobbled to the ER, trying to ignore the pain, only to hear the overwhelming cries from Eric's family. "No amputation, don't cut it off." How? Eric was so proud. How could he handle it? It was the sound of Eric's mom crying her heart out. But no matter how much they begged, the doctor shook his head with regret. "Crushed fracture, and there's a blood clot in his brain. It's serious. If we wait any longer, we could miss the best window for treatment." In the end, Eric had his limb amputated. But his situation was even worse than mine had been. His left leg was amputated entirely from the hip down. The doc mentioned the blood clot hadn't completely cleared, making Eric likely to go blind. For the next 2 days, I visited Eric often. The guy on the bed was pale, lifeless, so unlike the unstoppable Eric I once knew. I stayed by his bedside, waiting for him to wake up, ignoring my own injuries. People thought I was deeply in love with Eric. Even Eric's mom told me to go rest. I stubbornly shook my head and squeezed out some tears. "I'm fine. I just want to see Eric wake up. I'm afraid he'll feel bad." Truth is, I wanted to see him wake up just to tell him, "You look disgusting being disabled." What would the golden boy, Eric, do once he realized he'd not only lost a limb but could also go blind? By day 5, Eric woke up. I found the room in chaos, definitely his doing. A nurse was cleaning up the debris on the floor. Eric's mom looked worried, her eyes red from crying. Even though Eric was weak, he had the energy to be angry. I really underestimated him. Eric lay there, eyes wide, unseeing, like a lifeless doll. Just as the doc said, pressure from the blood clot caused temporary blindness. With his condition stable, they could take it out and he might see again. Eric's mom looked at his leg and shook her head at me. I realized Eric didn't know about his missing leg yet. But why let him have his way? I pretended not to notice. I quickly went to Eric, holding his hand tight, tears streaming. "Eric, pull yourself together. We can get a prosthetic and still ride horses and race cars." I knew he'd break down, but I didn't expect he'd go this insane. He grasped my hand, his voice was tight. "What did you say?" "Say it again." I was startled, but couldn't pull away. I ignored the pain in my hand, continuing to comfort him. "Eric, cry if you want, I'll always be here for you." Eric went wild, yanking out his 4-needle, trying to touch his missing leg. But there was nothing to feel. He paused, then started shaking violently. He howled, hitting his right leg hard, veins bulging. Eric's mom went to pull him back, but he pushed her away. The room was filled with his tortured cries. "Get out. All of you, leave." After a long time, Eric seemed exhausted. He relaxed his grip, looking devastated, with a low crying sound, like a caged beast. I stood nearby with a cold smirk, tears rolling down my face. But these weren't for Eric, they were for the memory of who I used to be. In that past life, when I first learned about my amputation, I was just as shattered. I had trained in ballet for 18 years. Even my instructor said I was meant to be the brightest star on stage, but then I lost a leg, and so did my dream. I will never forget those darkest days. I would lock myself away, not wanting to see anyone, hiding in a corner far from people. Anything could trigger my raw nerves. I often cut myself, even thought about suicide. It was Eric who broke through the locked door and carried me, bloody and broken. He embraced me tightly, kissed me gently. "Nora, I'm sorry, I couldn't protect you. Blame me, not yourself." Eric convinced my parents to let him take care of me at his place, promising he'd always be by my side. But it was all a scam in the end. We got engaged, and Eric used my family's resources to rapidly expand his business. In just 3 years, Eric's company rose to the top, leaving my family behind. He even sabotaged us in a land deal, attacking my family openly and covertly. I vaguely remember Mom mentioning it. But I relied too much on Eric then, blind to his schemes. It wasn't until I saw those chat logs that I realized how wrong I was. Seeing Eric suffer on the bed, an idea popped into my mind. Now that I've been given a fresh start, I'd make Eric pay for everything he did to me. He doesn't like me? Fine, I'll stay close by his side, make him need me, love me, become dependent on me. And when he does, I'll push him into despair. I leaned down, hugging Eric despite his whimpers. In his mom's shocked gaze, I vowed, "Eric, don't be scared. I'll take care of you forever. Even if you lost a leg, I'll stay right by your side." So, I took it upon myself to care for Eric. I visited his place daily, rain or shine. To others, it seemed like I loved Eric to the extreme. Even Eric thought the same. Who'd want to stake their future on someone who's disabled, right? When my mom learned I offered to care for Eric, she nearly locked me up. Her eyes filled with confusion. "Honey, Mom knows you like him, but what happened to him isn't your fault. Why risk your life for him?" I recalled Eric's cold accusation. "Nora, ask your parents. See how they pushed me to the edge." I never knew what made Eric cave, making him care for me, despite hating it, for 3 years. Yet, I'll never have that answer now. After I convinced my mom that I was totally fine, she finally eased up. Just like I used to be, Eric became irritable and quick-tempered after losing his leg. Since he couldn't see, he was more sensitive and paranoid. He either complained about the caregiver's loud footsteps or the food not being good enough. Several caregivers were swapped out in just a few weeks. And the stuff on his nightstand? Smashed countless times. No one seemed to calm Eric down, except for me. Only I knew Eric's pride. I understood what he needed, and the things that made him tick. Like when he absent-mindedly pressed his lips, I'd get him a cup of hot water right away. If he kept tossing and turning, I'd help him to the bathroom. Eric wasn't a fan of the chef's cooking, but loved the soup I made. Nobody knew, but those 3 past years, I'd made countless soups for Eric. I knew exactly what flavors he liked. Within a month, Eric kicked out all the help and caregivers. From then on, only I was allowed in his room. Sometimes Eric looked a bit lost. "Nora, you're so good to me, but Nora, I don't even deserve you now. You really don't have to." I knew Eric was starting to rely on me, but it wasn't enough for me. I pressed my finger to his lips and softly said, "I know, I just care about you. As long as you get better, nothing else matters to me." Eric didn't say anything else, but I could see the warmth in his eyes. With my care, Eric's temper gradually improved. He didn't smash things as often. Eric was clearly relying on me more, but I knew he didn't fully love me yet. There was still that first love deep down. As his health got better, the blood clot in Eric's head could be removed. His family brought in top surgeons for the surgery. It went incredibly well. The day the bandages came off, Eric was obviously excited. His eyes kept looking at the door. I knew who he was waiting for. After countless glances, a figure appeared. Rose, the famous dance prodigy from university, and also my roommate. People often called us the dancing duo. Graceful and talented. In sophomore year, Eric fell for Rose at first sight. From then on, every time he came to see me, it was really for her. I had loved Eric for 10 years. To say I wasn't hurt would be a lie. But Eric never turned me down, nor did he give me a clear answer. I knew I had lost completely, so I quietly stepped aside. But it seemed like they hadn't gotten together. I wasn't jealous of Rose, not until I found their messages on Eric's phone before the wedding. Eric, I missed you these 3 years. Me too. I regret not accepting you when you loved me. Now I realize you're the only one I love. Eric, if I came back and crashed your wedding, would you leave with me? I would. Every day since I got a second chance, those words made me sick every time I remembered them. I had to see for myself if Rose would still love Eric enough to crash a wedding. So, when Rose was tearfully caring for Eric, I brought over the supplies to change his bandages. Eric, time to change your bandages. The intimate mood stopped dead, and the air felt thick for a moment. I hesitated, feeling awkward. Did I come at the wrong time? But the doctor said this was the time for the bandage change. It's fine, Nora, I'll do it. I can take care of Eric. Rose said as she took the supplies from my hands, getting ready to change his bandages. I was more than happy to step aside and watch. I was just worried she wouldn't get to see this. When Rose carefully peeled off the bandage on Eric's leg, she visibly flinched. Eric's left leg was amputated from the thigh. The healing wound looked raw and intimidating, like an angry beast on the skin, chilling to the bone. There was a clatter as the medicine bottle fell from Rose's hand and shattered on the floor. She took a step back, visibly shocked and scared. Once again, the room went silent. You could hear everyone's breaths. Eric, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Rose's voice trembled. Eric's eyes were filled with hurt and disappointment. You guys talk, I'll head out. Not wanting to get caught up in their drama, I wisely left the room. I heard Eric's raspy voice questioning her. Are you really that scared of me? Am I that frightening? Eric, it was an accident, Rose stammered, her voice tinged with tears. Not long after, I heard things being thrown inside the room. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Eric was indeed upset again. But other than smashing things, there wasn't much he could do. Then came Eric's angry yell, leave, just go far away, and never come back. Don't show up in front of me again. Rose ran out of the room crying as she passed by. She shot me a glare and didn't look back. The flowers Rose sent over got tossed out by Eric. Nearly hit me in the face. I just smirked a bit. So, true love isn't all that when faced with disability. Rose's presence shook Eric, and he lost his hard-won calm. He got super angry again. Kept smashing things and even started cursing. When he smashed his phone, I finally noticed an impatient look creeping onto Eric's mom's face. Well, I guess it makes sense. Eric isn't her only son. Ever since Eric became disabled, his dad only visited him once. It's obvious his dad gave up on Eric. Eric's mom has been swamped lately, juggling the other woman and the illegitimate kid, not to mention running the company. Plus, dealing with Eric's mood swings. I guess anyone would have a hard time handling it for long. His mom doesn't visit as often, showing up just every now and then. Eric seems to have picked up on his mom's change, getting angry more frequently. So, whenever he's upset, I just stand quietly behind the door and watch. He doesn't let others near, and the maids don't dare to approach. When he yells for water, I pretend not to hear. I only appear after he's screamed several times and is raging. Then, I gently take his hand and soothe him. Eric, I'm sorry. I was busy with the soup and didn't hear you. Next time, I'll come over right away. Don't get upset, it's not good for you. Even when Eric raged, he'd glare at me. I'd stubbornly turn away, wiping my tears in distress. If you really hate me that much, I can leave. Finally, Eric's face showed panic. He clung to my hand, pathetic and vulnerable. Nora, don't go. You're all I have left. Time passed, and gradually, I knew Eric couldn't live without me. Eric's health was improving. And I finally got into the ballet company in a city. After 3 years, I was back on that familiar stage. I was almost moved to tears. With the lively music, I stretched my feet, spread my shoulders, dancing like a butterfly. Every jump and spin was filled with a surge of strength. Because of my excellent performance, the director personally recommended me to join a ballet competition. I spent less and less time at Eric's apartment to focus on my practice. The housekeeper called so many times. Only when I finally got some time off did the housekeeper seem relieved. "Miss Nora, thank goodness you're here. The young master has been throwing tantrums again, we just can't calm him." As soon as I walked in, there was Eric, expressionless. He immediately demanded, "What have you been busy with? Why aren't you visiting me?" I raised an eyebrow. Eric's pride was quite something. I flashed him a smile and said excitedly, "I got into the A City Ballet Company, and the director picked me to represent them in a competition. I'm just thrilled." I ignored Eric's increasingly dark expression and kept cheerfully talking. "Nora, enough." I pretended to accidentally say something wrong, covering my mouth. Then I glanced at Eric's empty left leg and lowered my head apologetically. "Eric, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." I paused and continued, "I've been so busy practicing, I neglected you. After the competition, I promise." Before I could finish, Eric slammed his fist on the table. "You're just rubbing it in because my leg is useless." He smirked coldly, mocking himself. "Even you think I'm useless?" Eric's outburst made me step back, a bit flustered. I wanted to comfort him but hesitated. "I didn't mean to hurt you. If you don't want me, I'll leave now." I wiped my tears, turned, and headed out. Then I heard a heavy thump behind me. Eric must have tried to stop me and fell off the bed in a panic. Seeing Eric so helpless, I remembered when he mocked me, Nora limping around like a clown. How do I keep myself from laughing now? He once turned my pain into a joke for others. Maybe karma's real because now Eric looks like a clown. If I could, I'd record this moment and let Eric see his clownish self. Since then, Eric got more clingy, scared of me leaving. He'd call me countless times a day. I was busy practicing and often ignored him. Then he'd send strings of messages. "Nora, will you visit today? Nora, I miss your rib soup. The housekeeper's isn't as good." I just put my phone on silent and ignored it. My dance mates teased, "Fighting with your boyfriend?" I laughed it off. Not a boyfriend, just a clingy guy who's starved for affection. I realized that maintaining a bit of distance works wonders with Eric. His first love avoided him, his parents abandoned him, and Eric became this unwanted burden. Clearly, I became his main support. Watching him feel insecure yet heavily reliant on me, I knew my plan was working. Mention leaving, and he'd practically beg me to stay. Men always want what they can't have. I found some twisted satisfaction in making Eric pine for me now and then. Eric's birthday was coming up fast. He'd been avoiding outsiders since the accident, losing touch with his childhood friends. A week prior, I contacted them to plan a special surprise. On the morning of his birthday, a bunch of his childhood friends arrived early. They brought a massive bouquet. His closest buddy even got him a limited edition sports car. They wanted to give Eric a big surprise. When they walked in, Eric was practicing walking with a cane. "Eric, look what we got for you. The latest supercar." The moment our eyes met, I clearly saw the shock in everyone's eyes. It seems the outside world doesn't know about Eric's condition. They stammered, "Eric, you?" Eric looked pale, with a mix of embarrassment and awkwardness in his eyes. Who would have thought that someone like Eric would end up like this? Because of the car accident, Eric can't stand hearing anything about cars now, and his old racing buddies showing up, it was like rubbing salt in his wound. He clenched his fists so tight that the veins were popping. Seeing the car keys in his buddy's hand almost made him roar. "Who told you to come? Get out, all of you." A perfectly good birthday party was ruined just like that. I escorted Eric's buddies out. I apologized. "Don't take it to heart, Eric just can't deal with it yet." They all understood and walked out sadly. Back in the room, I faced Eric's gloomy expression. Through gritted teeth, he asked me, "Nora, did you do it on purpose? To make a joke out of me?" I looked down at him, non-committal. In a flash, Eric's expression turned to one of deep sorrow. He looked at me almost pleadingly. "Why are you doing this? I was ready to spend my life with you. I love you so much." I couldn't help but laugh. In a past life, when I needed his love the most, he found me disgusting every time we got close. He would complain in a chat group, nauseating, "Don't want to touch her. When will it end?" And now he's the one with a broken leg. Ready to spend his life with me? Say he loves me? What a joke. I don't need such cheap love. But now it's my turn to find him disgusting. So I read him the words I had long prepared, word by word. Who can understand? Every time I see her limping, it makes me want to puke. I wish I were the one who had the amputation. I wanted nothing more than to call off the wedding. Watching Eric's increasingly confused face, I stepped closer and whispered in his ear with a smile, "How does it feel to be kicked when you're down? That's exactly what you did to me in the past life. You're crippled, and you think I'd blindly love you?" Eric seemed to remember something. He grabbed his head and fell to the floor from the intense pain, rolling and moaning. Sweat poured down his forehead. I coldly watched it all, feeling a thrill inside. No one knows how many nightmares I've had since coming back. In those dreams, Eric pretended to love me but cruelly pushed me into darkness. Countless nights I'd wake up scared. I feared rebirth was just a dream. Afraid I'd wake up once again as the Nora abandoned at the wedding. I fixed my gaze on his broken leg and said with endless sarcasm, "Eric, you're disgusting with that missing leg." Finally, Eric on the floor broke down completely. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes, growling low from his throat. He looked pitiful. I didn't bother with him and walked out the door. All I heard was him begging, "Nora, don't go, I beg you." I completely broke ties with Eric. And I wasn't running to his apartment anymore. I focused on preparing for the ballet competition. Within a few days, word spread that Eric became handicapped. But his mom called a few times, always asking me to visit Eric. I refused a few times, but his mom kept pleading. "Nora, please visit Eric, he won't listen to us, and only you can comfort him. Think of how good I've been to you over the years and visit him in the hospital." After hanging up, I found it amusing. I've been so harsh to Eric, and he still wants me to see him? Isn't he afraid of what I might say to provoke him again? To focus on preparing for the competition, I chose to ignore it all. Day and night, I practiced tirelessly. No one knew how much sweat I had shed. Only I knew how much I longed for that stage for 3 years. Every move I made was elegant, each spin and leap moved the audience to tears. Finally having the chance to stand on it again, I wasn't going to waste it. On the competition day, I won with a sweeping victory. The applause was thunderous, buzzing in my ears. On stage, I was moved to tears, tears welling in my eyes. At that moment, I forgot the hate, forgot the pain. I was just the shiniest white swan on stage. It felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. After the competition, I got a call from Eric. His voice was gentle, even with a hint of a smile. "Nora, congratulations." "Thanks." In a daze, I heard Eric take a deep breath. "Nora, I remember everything. I was the one who wronged you, toyed with your feelings. You hate me and you should, but I never meant for you to die." I turned to look at the flashing neon lights and didn't respond. "Nora, besides the hate, is there still a bit?" "No." I decisively cut Eric off. Some things are meant to be irreparable from the start. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. For a long moment, I finally heard him say, "I got it." The next time I saw Eric was in the hospital hallway. Eric was in a wheelchair, looking pale and worn out. The once lively young guy seemed like he had aged into an old man. The nurse who cared for him mentioned that Eric refused treatment, and his old injuries from the car accident flared up again. In just half a year, Eric became a shadow of who he was. His family openly welcomed back an illegitimate son, who took over the family business without a hitch. Eric's mom was so upset she ended up in the hospital, and the family was in utter chaos. But Eric didn't seem the least bit interested in fighting back. Day after day, he just stayed in his apartment, staring blankly at the blooming crabapple flowers in the yard. When our eyes met, Eric paused in surprise. I could see this undisguised hope in his eyes. "Nora, are you here for me?" As soon as he asked, Eric gave a self-deprecating laugh. "How could that be? You hate me so much." He watched me carefully and said, "Nora, if there's a next life, would you forgive me?" I gave him a calm smile. "Eric, it's all in the past. I don't hate you anymore. But I also don't want to forgive you." As soon as I finished talking, that hint of light in Eric's eyes finally dimmed, turning into sadness. Although I didn't hate him anymore, I could never forget the anger I felt when I found out the truth. I can stop hating, but I'll never forgive. The last time I heard about Eric was the news of his death. Eric committed suicide in his private apartment at 3 in the morning, slashing his wrists. When he died, there was a bouquet of vivid crabapple flowers next to him. Crabapple flowers are my favorite. In a past life, Eric planted an entire garden of them to make me happy. Maybe he truly did care for me back then. Outside the window, a gentle breeze passed by, stirring something inside me. It felt like I could see that boy I once genuinely liked again. When I won an award, he'd give me flowers and take me out to celebrate all night. When I got a bad grade, and people scolded me, he'd drag me to the library to study. When I made him speechless with anger, he'd just helplessly tap my forehead. I'd wade through crowded places, dumbly holding his backpack and watching him play a game. Then we'd ride our bikes home in the glow of the setting sun. Back then, I thought we'd be like that forever. I didn't know reality would hit us so hard. Much later, I found out the meaning behind crabapple flowers. Longing and hopeless love. Just like Eric and me. When I loved him, he didn't care. But when he turned around, I didn't want to go back anymore.